Do you want to make your own Airbnb styled website? One part of that is the database. Let's design that now. Let's start on the homepage of Airbnb.com. We'll look at a range of features on this website and gradually create our database design for it. What do we see? The main part of the screen is images of properties. It looks like it shows different properties that can be booked. There's a location, a country, a price, and some dates and a distance. Let's get started with designing the database. I'll open my favourite database designing tool, Lucidchart. We'll start by adding a table to represent a property. Let's call it property. We'll add a primary key called ID and then some columns. On the property, we saw it had a location and a country. So we'll add that to our diagram. Now, do we add this as a column in the property table? Well, we could, but we could also assume that there is a defined list of locations in the world and a defined list of countries. Whenever we have this scenario, where there is a defined list of something but it's related to something else, I recommend creating a lookup table. This is to help with validating data and improving data quality. So let's do that. Before we start with the diagram, if you want the full final diagram, explanations of each table and column, and the SQL scripts to create the tables, visit databasestar.com/dbdesign. You can check out the link in the description as well. We'll add some tables for this. First, we add a country table. We'll add a primary key and a country name. Next, we'll add another table called location. This would be the part that comes before the country here. We add the location table, the primary key, and a column for the name of the location. We need to relate this to a country. A location has a country, so we add a country ID as a foreign key to the country table. This allows us to record that a location of Sydney exists in a country of Australia. Now, how do we relate this to a property? A property has a location, so we can do something similar and add the location ID to the property table. So we've covered the location and country of a property. What else is there? Each of the properties has a price. The prices are different for each property, and there's the word total after the price. I assume this means the total price for multiple days, because there's a date range above it. We could assume for now that each property has a single price for a night. Let's add that to our diagram. What else do we have? There is a photo for each property. There are little white dots at the bottom of the image indicating there are many photos. If I hover over one of them, I can click on an arrow to scroll through the photos. Let's add that to our diagram. A property can have many images, but an image can only exist for one property. So we add a separate table for images and link it to the property table. We'll add a column called image URL, which would store the location on the server where the image is stored. We also add an image order so the website knows which image to display first, then second, and so on. On each of the property listings, there's a little heart icon. That looks like a way to like or save a property as one of your favourites. This is the first feature we've seen that allows you to do something specific to you as a user. We'll need to create the concept of a user account in the database. Let's do that now. We can create a table called user account. I'll avoid the word user because it's often a reserved word in databases. In this table, we can add a few columns including the primary key, a first and last name, an email address, and a password. Let's assume we want to add a joined date as well, as it may be useful to show on your profile or for some analysis by the company to see user growth over time. Now back to the favourites. We want to record that a user has marked a property as a favourite by clicking that heart icon. A user can do that to many properties, and a property could be favorited by many users. So we have a many-to-many relationship. We capture this as a joining table between property and user account. We can now store the favorite properties for each user. Back on the website, what else do we see? What's this set of icons across the top? It says OMG, countryside, amazing views, and so on. These look like types of properties or attributes of a property. We could assume that a property could fit into more than one of these. It could be a countryside house with an amazing view. Let's add this to our diagram. What do we call this concept? Let's call it a category for now. We've got a predefined list, such as countryside or amazing view. So we need a table for that list. We'll also need a joining table to capture which categories apply to each property. Now we should be able to handle that functionality of clicking on the categories and showing matching properties. On the top of the page here, there's some kind of filter or search. If I click anywhere, I see a search box to search for locations and some images. It looks like this shows regions in the world such as Europe or Southeast Asia, as well as countries like Italy. We've got countries in our design, but not this concept of a region, which I assume countries can belong to. Let's add that. A country can belong to a region. For example, a region of Europe has countries of France and Denmark. So let's add a table for this. We can also add a foreign key to the country. So we've captured this concept of a region so we can do that filtering on the home page. The next part of that search section is a check-in date. This is the concept of making bookings and seeing availability, which we'll revisit a little later in the video. Let's click on a property. A new page is opened just for that property. We can see the photos which we've added to the database diagram. We've also got some kind of title or name at the top. Let's add that to the diagram. We can add a column called property name to the property table, which can store this value. Below the photos, we see this section here. It says 2 guests, 1 bedroom, 1 bed, 1 bath. This is a short list of things that apply to this property. Let's add them to our design. We can add each of these columns on the property table. Below that on the property listing is a box that says guest favourite, with a star rating and a link to the reviews. I'm not sure how the guest favourite is calculated. It could be above a certain overall rating or some other criteria. If I click on this number of reviews here, we can see more information about the reviews. We can see an overall rating on the top left of 4.93. We also see different categories or components of the rating. It looks like people can review different components of the property and then an overall rating for the property. Each review has a name of who left the review, a number of stars, and a comment, and when the review was left. Let's add this to our design. For the guest favourite, there are a couple of ways we could do this, and one of them is to add a column to the property table to indicate if it is a guest favourite. We'll call it is guest favourite, which can show 1 for yes and 0 for no. We'll start with the concept of a review. A review is by a user for a particular property, so we can add a user review table and add links to the property and user account table. We've also got the concept of an overall rating, so we'll add that as a column. There's a need to write a review or a comment about the review being left, so we'll add that as well as the date the review was made. What about those different components of a review? Well, they are a defined list, and I assume they are the same for each property. So we add a lookup table, and then a joining table between this and the review table. We need the joining table because a review has many components, and a component is used for many reviews. In the joining table, we store the rating, which is the individual rating for that component for that review. So that's the review concept captured. Under the reviews section, we see a section about the host. This listing says, hosted by Judy, 6 years hosting. There are a few ways we could capture this host concept. We could have a separate table, but I think we can keep it simple and achieve what we need by having a host that is a regular user account. A host is a type of relationship to a property. I think we can capture this by adding a column to the property table called host ID, which links to the user account that is the host. This will mean that a host is just another user but has a relationship to a property. We'll be able to see the name of the host. How can we tell how long they have been hosting? There are a few ways we could do it. Perhaps a separate table to log hosts and properties, or perhaps a date column in the property table, or a date in the user account table. Having a separate table would allow for multiple hosts at a time and for a property to change hosts, but we're not sure if that's functionality we want yet. So to keep it simple, we'll just add an attribute to the user account table. It's on the user account table because we assume we want to see when that person began hosting, not when the property started being hosted. So we've got the functionality for hosting a property now. On this page, there are a few points about the property, such as great check-in experience and park for free. These could be attributes of a property or different things that can apply to a property. I assume that there's a standard list and they can apply to many properties, so let's create a table with a many-to-many relationship. We'll add an ID and a name for the attribute. Some of the attributes had further information describing it, so we'll add that into the description column. Next, we add a joining table because this is a many-to-many relationship. A property can have many attributes, and an attribute can apply to many properties. What else is on the web page? There's a description here of the actual property to tell us more about it. We can click on the Show More link and a pop-up appears with a long description. How do we add this to our diagram? We add a description column to the property table. This would be a large enough text field to contain that long description we saw on the page. On the property listing, there's a section here for what this place offers. It looks like another list of attributes that can apply to the property. This can be captured within our existing attribute table. After that, there's a calendar picker which is related to the booking box on the right of the page. We'll come back to that later. We can keep scrolling past the reviews as we've covered that already. We see a Where You'll Be map, which is the location of the property. We've got the general location of the property, but we don't have the exact address, which is shared with the person when they book the property. To do this, we can add some address fields to the property. I've shared more about storing address fields in this video, and to apply it to this diagram, I'll add the address line 1 and 2 fields to the property table. We've already got a table for location and country, so we don't need any more. We've got the host information already. After that, there are a few points on things to know. Each of these points is broken into different categories such as house rules, safety and property, and cancellation policy. We can capture these as attributes, but we don't have the concept of category. Let's add that. We can add a new table called attribute category. We'll add an ID and a column to describe the category, such as house rules. Then we link it to the attribute table. We should be able to use those tables to capture those attributes from the bottom of the page. At the bottom of the page is this kind of breadcrumb list of locations for the property, which we've already captured, then a bunch of links to different pages on AirBNB. So that's it for the property page, except for that booking functionality that we skipped over before, so let's capture that now. How does this booking concept work? We can select a check-in date and a check-out date. We can see that a price is being calculated, which includes a nightly rate multiplied by the number of nights we have selected. It also shows some fees. Let's add this to our diagram and come back. To add this to our database, we need a table to capture the details of a booking. We create this table called Booking. We'll add an ID for it and an ID for the property being booked and the user who is making the booking. Next, we add in the check-in date and check-out date for the booking. Now we add in the prices. We can add in the nightly price, which is the price of a single night in the property. This is the same as the property nightly price column, but we add it to the booking so that if we change the price of the property in the future, we can do that without impacting the bookings. Next, we'll add a couple of columns for the fees, such as a service fee and cleaning fee. Finally, we add in a total price column, which represents the total price of the booking. We've now captured the dates and prices. Another thing on the booking was this concept of guests. We can click on the guests here and see that we can select different numbers of guests and even different types: adults, children, infants, and pets. So because there is a defined list, we'll add this as a lookup table. A property can have multiple guest types, and a guest type can apply to different properties, so we'll add a many-to-many relationship. We add the guest type table here, which will contain entries for adults, children, infants, and pets. Then we add the joining table to relate it to the booking. We need a place to store the number of guests selected. We chose the number for the booking and for each guest type, so we add this as a column in Booking Guests. In the booking section, the user would then click on Reserve and the booking is reserved and saved. We've now covered the booking table in the design. The last feature we'll add to our diagram is this filter button on the top of the page here. If we click this, we'll see a pop-up appear that shows different things we can filter our search on. The first one is the type of place, which can be any type, room or entire home. We don't have anything in our design for this, so let's add it. Because it's a defined list, we'll add a lookup table for this called place type. We'll add a foreign key to the property table as well, so we can specify whether this property is a room or an entire home. Let's see what else there is. Next is the price range, which we have already covered by our price column. We have rooms and beds, which we've already covered as well. There's a section here called Top Tier Stays that includes the Guest Favourite button, which we've already included earlier. Next is something called property type, which could be a house, apartment, guest house or hotel. We don't have this in our design yet, so let's add it. It's another defined list, so we add a lookup table for it, with a name and a primary key. We'll also add a foreign key to the property table, called Property Type ID, to store the type of each particular property. We've now added the property type. Next on this filter page is the amenities section. We've covered this with our property attributes table. Then we have the booking options, such as instant book, self-check-in, and allow pets. We've also covered these by our attributes table. However, under instant book, it says listings you can book without waiting for host approval. This indicates that there is an approval process when booking a property. It's not just booked right away. We should capture this in our booking table. We'll add a separate table to store the possible status values, such as created, waiting for approval, approved, rejected, or whatever we need. Then we add a foreign key to the booking table to store the status of the booking. That feature is now added. Next we have accessibility features. This can be covered by the attributes section as well. Then we have host language. This describes the language or languages that the host communicates in. We don't have this yet, so let's add it to the host. Near the user account, we can add a table called language. In this table, we add an ID and a language name. We can assume that hosts can communicate in multiple languages, so we add a joining table. We can now capture languages for hosts. That's the end of the filter functionality. We've captured the main features of the AirBNB website in our database design. What does our final design look like? Here it is. We can see it covers everything that we've seen so far. The property table is the largest one and many tables are related to it. We've also got the user account table with a lot of relationships. As I mentioned earlier, if you want this database design in a PDF file, along with explanations of each column and table, and the SQL to create the database, visit databasestar.com/dbdesign or click the link in the description. What else could you add to this design that we didn't cover in this video? Perhaps a chat feature between the host and the guest to ask questions and communicate the details for checking in. We could also add payment functionality, the ability to cancel bookings, adding your own home as an Airbnb to become a host. We took an idea for an Airbnb website and created a database design. If you found this video useful, you'll probably like this video where we create a database design for a hotel management system. Now, all this browsing of Airbnbs has made me want to take a holiday. Let's see what's available.